1. Ghosts of the Fire. The moon hung low and heavy over the blackthorn forest, its light draping the trees in silver shadows. Alpha Kieran Blackthorn stood on the ridge, eyes narrowed as the scent of blood and smoke curled through the night. Another rogue ambush. Another one of his warriors nearly dead. The growing unrest in the borderlands gnawed at him, but tonight something was different. He had felt her. The warrior had been moments from death, tangled in a cruel trap of iron thorns, when a hooded rogue emerged from the mist, silent, swift, and deadly. With uncanny precision, she tore through the attackers, then vanished before Kieran arrived. All the guards spoke of her strange grace, the way her eyes flashed gold in the moonlight, and how she whispered to the wounded man before disappearing into the shadows. Kieran should have dismissed it. Should have believed what he had believed for 5 years, that Elara, his fated mate, had died in the fire that destroyed half the eastern forest and nearly broke his soul. But something about the rogue scent made his wolf stir. Not in warning. In recognition. Back in his chamber, Kieran stood at the tall window overlooking the packlands, his hand clenched around a faded locket he hadn't touched in years. Elara's locket. Her scent, floral and fierce, wild like the wind, had been gone from the world for too long. Until tonight. 1,000 memories crashed in his mind, Elara's laughter in the garden, her firelight hair in the twilight, the warmth of her bare skin tangled in his beneath the furs. How he had held her ashes in trembling hands. How the moon had wept with him when she died. But had she? He tried to shake the feeling. Tried to believe it was just grief playing cruel games again. Yet his wolf wouldn't rest. Not tonight. She saved him, his beta had said. And then she looked at me, Alpha. And I swear it, she knew you. As the wind howled beyond the stone walls, Kieran's heart whispered a name he hadn't spoken aloud in 5 years. Elara. 2. A knock at midnight. The Blackthorn packhouse was silent when the knock came. It was just after midnight, the hour when the world is held in a breathless hush, when wolves dream of old battles and lost loves. Alpha Kieran was alone in his study, staring into a half-empty glass of scotch, mind haunted by the rogue woman who'd vanished into the woods days ago. The fire crackled in the hearth, but it did little to thaw the ice crawling through his chest. Then came the knock, 3 slow, deliberate taps at the great iron doors. He didn't move at first. No visitor came to the Blackthorn gates unannounced, not in the dead of night, not when tensions were high and rogue threats loomed. Yet something pulled at him. Something old and aching. He rose, heart suddenly pounding, and descended the stone steps like a man following a ghost. When the guards opened the doors, a gust of wind swept in. And standing in the flickering torchlight was her. Elara. Alive. Wrapped in a dark cloak soaked with mist, her copper hair clung to her cheeks, wild and wind-tossed. Her eyes met his, those same storm-gray eyes that used to look at him like he was her whole world. Only now, they were guarded. Older. Wounded. Kieran froze, breath stolen from his lungs. It couldn't be. He had mourned her. Buried her. Burned half a forest in rage for her. Elara? He whispered, voice cracking like brittle bark. But it wasn't just her. 2 small figures stepped from behind her cloak. A boy and a girl, no older than 5. Both with hair like burnished bronze. And his eyes. That same piercing silver hue that had run in the Blackthorn line for generations. The world tilted beneath Kieran's feet. Elara didn't speak, not at first. Just looked at him with a sorrow so deep it rooted him to the floor. Then finally, in a voice barely louder than the wind, she said, "We need shelter. For the children. And for what's coming." The warriors at the gates exchanged glances, unsure whether to draw their swords or drop to their knees. Kieran didn't care. His heart was thundering in his chest, not with rage or confusion, but with the sudden, searing return of something he thought he'd buried long ago. Hope. He stepped forward, stopping just inches from her, afraid she might vanish if he touched her. The scent hit him fully now, Elara. Real. Alive. But layered with something new. Something maternal and ancient. A protective energy that flared like fire around her cubs. His voice was barely a growl. "Are they mine?" Tears shimmered in Elara's eyes, but she nodded once. "Yes, Kieran. They're yours. And they're in danger." And just like that, the past came roaring back, not in flames this time, but in whispers and heartbeats. And the war had only just begun. 3. The Eyes of an Alpha. The morning after Elara's return dawned with a nervous stillness over the Blackthorn pack. No one slept. Not the guards who'd seen the impossible. Not the council, who whispered of long-buried laws. And certainly not Kieran, who stood just outside the pack's training grounds, watching 2 children chase each other in the soft grass, unaware of the storm they'd carried through the gates. His children. He hadn't said the words aloud yet. Not to the pack, not even to himself. But watching the boy, lean, quick, with his jaw clenched in concentration, and the girl, wild, laughing, with a spark in her step, he didn't need a blood test. They were his in every way that mattered. Beside him stood Garrick, his loyal beta of 10 years, eyes narrowed and arms crossed. "Alpha," he muttered, "I saw it." They shifted. Not fully. But enough. Kieran tensed. "When?" "Just now," Garrick said, nodding toward the boy. "It happened when he got knocked down." He didn't even mean to, just instinct. A shimmer of silver around him. Like lightning under his skin. "And her?" She growled. Real growled. Not like a pup. It was deep, ancestral. Kieran's jaw tightened, heart thudding. The silver aura. It was said to only appear in direct descendants of Alpha bloodlines, strong, pure bloodlines. And no child in the pack had shown it in generations. Until now. Behind them, the rest of the warriors had gathered silently, watching the children with veiled awe and whispered prayers. These weren't just runts of a rogue and a grieving Alpha. They were heirs. And more than that, they were proof that something sacred had been lost, and had returned. Kieran turned to Garrick. "Does the council know?" "They suspect," Garrick said carefully. "But they'll want confirmation. A shifting ceremony. Soon." Kieran nodded grimly, but his eyes stayed locked on Elara. She sat beneath the old pine tree, eyes closed, face tilted toward the sun as if savoring something she'd missed for years. Her presence was still unreal to him, and yet, when she smiled softly at her children, it made his heart twist in a way he hadn't felt since the night he marked her as his mate. He walked toward her, slowly, cautiously, as if approaching the wild animal that had once let him hold it. "You didn't tell me," he said quietly when he reached her. She opened her eyes but didn't flinch. "Would you have believed me? 5 years ago?" "No," he admitted. "But I would have looked for you harder. I would have burned the world to find you." Alara's gaze fell to the ground. "You already did. That fire. I thought you'd never forgive me." Kieran sat beside her, close enough to feel her warmth, far enough not to rush the moment. He studied her profile, the way time had added strength to her features, how pain had carved new lines into her softness. "They carry something ancient, Elara," he said. "Our twins. The silver aura. It hasn't been seen in generations." She met his eyes. "I know. That's why I brought them here. Because something is coming, Kieran. And only our blood, our bond, can protect them." He was silent, but in that moment, something inside him shifted. Not a full transformation. Just a flicker of what once was, what could be again. The beginning of a return, not just of Elara and the children, but of the mate bond that fate had once blessed. And time had tried to sever. 4. Betrayal in the moonlight. The moon was full, heavy and golden, as it hovered above the Blackthorn Pack's ceremonial cliff, casting long shadows across the forest below. The air carried a strange stillness, the kind that warned of a coming storm. And in Kieran's heart, that storm had already begun to churn. Elara stood before him, wrapped in a dark cloak, her eyes sharp but weary, her voice low as she finally said the words he'd suspected were coming. "It was Alpha Draven who took me." The name hit Kieran like a blade. Draven, the exiled Alpha of the Crimson Hollow Pack. A traitor, a monster, a man Kieran had once called brother by oath before war broke them apart. "He kept me hidden. Used the pregnancy to bind me," Elara continued, her voice cracking. "He wanted leverage, power over you. And when the twins were born, he realized what they were. He tried to raise them as his own." Kieran's wolf stirred violently beneath his skin. The thought of that man's hands near Elara, near his children, made his vision darken with rage. "Why didn't you escape sooner?" She looked away, ashamed. "Because he promised if I ran, he'd kill them." Silence fell between them, but it was heavy, pulsing with pain and something deeper, regret and residual love. Kieran turned away, struggling to contain the fury building in his chest. Then a rustle behind them. Kieran's new Luna, Seraphina, stepped from the shadows, pale-faced, her silk gown fluttering in the wind like a ghost. "So," she said coolly, "you've finally told him." Alara's expression tightened. "You knew." Kieran's gaze snapped to Seraphina, suspicion twisting in his gut. What is she talking about? But Seraphina didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled, bitter, sharp. "I knew Draven had someone hidden. I didn't know it was her, not until she arrived here with those brats." "Careful," Kieran growled, voice low with warning. Serafina lifted her chin. "You think I didn't see it, Kieran? The way your eyes followed her the moment she appeared. The way your wolf reached for her like it never reached for me. I was always second in your heart. Always waiting for a ghost." Elara stepped forward, protective fire in her eyes. "You're aligned with Draven, aren't you?" Silence. Kieran's blood ran cold. "Answer her," he demanded. Serafina looked at him, face twisting in pain. "He offered me a seat at his side. Said he'd make me Luna of the United North. And you? You barely looked at me anymore. I thought if I helped him win, he'd give me what you never would." Kieran's heart fractured in that moment, not for Serafina's betrayal, but for the time he had wasted pretending he could move on from Elara. For letting another woman share his bed while his true mate had been suffering in silence. "You're banished," he said coldly. "From this pack. From me." Serafina flinched, her mask finally cracking, tears welling in her eyes. But she didn't beg. She simply turned and vanished into the woods, leaving behind only the echo of her betrayal. Kieran turned back to Elara, chest heaving. "You loved her?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "No. I tried to. I thought I had to. But I never stopped loving you, Elara. Even when I believed you were ash and memory." She looked at him then, fully, eyes shimmering in the moonlight. "And now?" He stepped forward, gently brushing a lock of hair from her cheek. "Now. I just want to make up for lost time." 5. Blood secrets and binding marks. The old ceremonial grounds lay hidden deep within the blackthorn forest, cloaked in vines and silence. Few in the pack remembered the stories tied to this place, of blood rites, ancient oaths, and the marks left by wolves destined to change the world. But the twins remembered none of that. They were just children chasing fireflies beneath a silver moon. Until the earth beneath them pulsed. Kieran and Elara were speaking nearby, quiet, tense words about protection, trust, and the council's demands, when the shift in the air stilled them both. A hum, low and strange, vibrated through the soil, and the forest suddenly held its breath. Then the twins screamed. Kieran and Elara rushed to the clearing, only to stop dead at the edge. The twins stood in the center of a glowing circle etched into the mossy ground. Runes, ancient and long forgotten, had surfaced like ink beneath water. Light danced up their skin in sharp, golden lines, wrapping around their wrists and over their hearts like chains of prophecy. "What is this?" Kieran murmured, stepping forward, but Elara grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with memory. "I've seen this," she whispered. "In Draven's fortress. He was searching for these runes. He said the twins would awaken them. That they were chosen." The children stood frozen, eyes glazed, mouths whispering a language neither parent recognized. Their auras shimmered with silver and something darker, violet, flickering with unsettling power. Then, with a flash of light and a gust of wind, the runes vanished. The twins collapsed. Elara raced to them, heart pounding as she pulled them into her arms. Kieran knelt beside her, brushing the sweat-soaked hair from his son's brow. The children were breathing, but something had changed. Etched into their skin were binding marks, elegant, spiraling patterns that pulsed faintly with light. Living tattoos. Symbols of magic long erased from werewolf history. That night, the Blackthorn elders were summoned. One by one, the old wolves examined the twins and whispered the same word under their breath, prophecy. An elder named Ulrich, nearly blind but sharp as a dagger, stepped forward and said, "This hasn't been seen in centuries. The children bear the sigils of the Moonborn." Kieran frowned. "That's a myth." "No," Ulrich said. "It's a warning. The Moonborn were said to be wolves with the power to unite or destroy the bloodlines. One twin carries the light, and one the darkness. Only together can they balance the future. If they are separated, the world burns." Kieran's gaze flicked to Elara, who clutched both children close, her hands trembling. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked softly. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Draven mentioned the prophecy, but I thought he was mad. I didn't think it was real. I didn't want it to be." Kieran took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Whatever this means, whatever they are, we face it together." For a moment, they just sat there, parents, mates, survivors, united by the mystery of their children and the bond they had never truly broken. Above them, the stars burned brighter than ever before. 6. The Luna's hidden agenda. The Blackthorn pack hadn't slept since the runes awoke. The prophecy whispered on every tongue, from the council chamber to the kitchens, the Moonborn twins, children of fate, destined to either unite the packs or plunge them into chaos. But not everyone welcomed their return. Deep within the western wing of the packhouse, Serafina, the disgraced Luna, paced her private chamber, the flame light catching on her white silk robes, her hand absently rubbing the slight curve of her stomach. Yes, she was pregnant. Yes, the child was Kieran's. And no, she didn't care about the twins. What she cared about was power. And power, she now realized, wouldn't come through the mate bond she tried, and failed, to forge with the Alpha. No. Power would come through blood. And secrets. A knock at her door. She opened it to find Mira, the healer, pale-faced, clutching a scroll she wasn't meant to have seen. Seraphina snatched it, eyes racing over the ancient glyphs. Her pulse quickened. There it was. The dark sigil burned into the boy's wrist wasn't a mark of strength, it was a curse. A fragment of magic tied to the ancient wolf king who once nearly destroyed the realm. One of the twins carried it. But which one? Seraphina smiled. Later that evening, Kieran found her sitting by the fire in the war room, pretending calm. "I asked you to leave," he said coldly. "I'm still Luna until the council strips me," she replied, sipping her tea. "And we need to talk. About the twins." His jaw clenched. "Say what you came to say, Seraphina." She rose slowly, her hand resting on her belly. "I know you think I betrayed you. And maybe I did. But I'm still carrying your child. And that gives me a stake in the future of this pack." He said nothing. She leaned in, her voice a whisper of venom and silk. "One of those twins is cursed, Kieran. You saw it yourself, the violet light. That's not prophecy. It's darkness. If you don't separate them now, we could lose everything. You could lose your heir." Kieran's stare darkened. "They are both my heirs." "Are they?" she whispered. "Think carefully. That boy could be the undoing of everything your bloodline has built." And then she turned and walked away, leaving silence in her wake. Later that night, Elara entered Kieran's quarters without knocking. She had heard the whispers, the council's worries. She saw the heaviness in his eyes. "What did she say to you?" Elara asked. Kieran didn't lie. "She claims one of the twins is cursed." Elara flinched but nodded. Draven said something similar. He called it the split. Said the prophecy always creates balance, light and dark. And that the stronger the light, the more dangerous the dark. Kieran moved toward her, cupping her face gently. "If it's true, we still protect them. Together." A breath. A beat. She nodded. Together. And for the first time since her return, she let herself fall into his arms, let him kiss her like the years between them hadn't happened, like betrayal, prophecy, and war didn't loom at their door. Because if they were going to survive this, they needed to remember who they were before fate tore them apart. 7. The Trial of Truth. The Blackthorn Council chamber was ancient, carved from stone and blood oath, with wolf bone torches that never went out. It was here that laws were written, loyalties tested, and once in a generation, truths demanded. Elara stood in the center of the sacred circle, barefoot on the cold stone, surrounded by elders cloaked in gray and silence. Her cloak had been taken, her hands bound with silver-threaded cord, not out of punishment, but tradition. This was the trial of truth, an ancient ritual binding both wolf and spirit to speak nothing but what lives in the soul. Kieran stood outside the circle, a storm behind his eyes. He hated this, every piece of it. To question Elara's claim was to question his own blood, his own instincts. But the council had demanded proof that the twins were his, that Elara was not a rogue spy, that this was prophecy. And not deception. Elara's gaze met his. She didn't look angry. She looked heartbroken. Not because of the ritual, but because part of him, some part, no matter how small, had allowed this to happen. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. Elder Ulrich stepped forward, pressing a small blade to her palm. A single drop of blood fell into the ceremonial bowl carved with ancient glyphs. The stone beneath her glowed faintly, soft, moonlit blue. A sign that the bond of truth had taken hold. "Elara of no pack," Ulrich began, "you are charged with deception, infiltration, and claiming heirs to the Blackthorn Alpha. Do you swear, on your blood and your spirit, to speak only truth?" "I do." "Were the children you brought into this territory fathered by Alpha Kieran Blackthorn?" "Yes." "Were they born of his seed, not taken or altered by sorcery?" "Yes." Ulrich nodded slowly, then paused. "And do you swear upon your soul, that no other bloodline flows within their veins?" Elara hesitated. And in that moment of silence, the entire room leaned forward. "I?" Her voice trembled. She looked at Kieran, who was frozen, waiting, hurting. Then she said it. "The twins are Kieran's. But I carry something else in me. Something that didn't come from either of us." A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Elder Ulrich stepped back. The bowl of blood flared white. "What do you mean?" Kieran demanded, stepping forward. Elara's voice cracked. "When Draven held me captive, he performed something dark. A ritual. I fought it, I did. But it left a trace. Not in me. In them. A third presence. A shadow. One I never understood." She fell to her knees, shaking, tears streaking her face. "I never meant to hide it from you. I was afraid if I told you, you'd reject them. Reject me." Kieran moved before the council could speak, stepping into the circle, defying protocol, and gathering her into his arms. "I lost you once," he said fiercely. "I won't lose you again. Not because of something you never chose." The elders murmured, but they said no more. The trial was over. The truth had been spoken. And though it brought no easy comfort, it had revealed the one thing stronger than blood. A bond that refused to break, even when fate tried to twist it. 8. The child who shouldn't exist. The wind howled through the Blackthorn Mountains that night, a sharp and bitter cry that mirrored the unease stirring in the hearts of all who dwelled within the pack borders. Inside the healer's quarters, the girl twin, Leora, slept soundly, curled into Elara's side. But her brother, Kieran, had not slept in days. His dreams were darker now. Visions of fire. Voices in an ancient tongue. His eyes, once silver and bright, now shimmered with a violet hue when the moonlight struck them just right, something no wolf had ever seen. Not even in the oldest legends. It began during training. One of the warrior pups lunged at Kieran in mock combat, routine, playful. But in a flash, Kieran's aura burst outward in a blast of shadow light, sending the boy flying across the courtyard, unconscious. The stone beneath Kieran's feet cracked, scorched black in the shape of a spiral. Everyone froze. And Kieran, watching from the edge of the circle, felt something cold bloom in his chest. That night, as he and Elara sat in the war room, silence pressed heavy between them. "He's changing," Elara whispered, arms wrapped tightly around herself. "Not just shifting early. Not like Leora. This is different." Kieran's jaw was clenched. "It's not just strength. It's something old. Something I can't name." They both knew it. They just hadn't dared say it aloud. Then came a knock. Elder Ulrich entered slowly, his gnarled hands clutching a weathered book bound in cracked black leather. "I've seen it once before," he said quietly, laying the book before them. "The mark. The power. The violet aura. It's not alpha blood, it's shadow blood." Elara stiffened. "Shadow blood?" Kieran frowned. "That's a myth." "No," Ulrich said. "It's a bloodline born of the moon goddess and her exiled son. A forbidden line, neither good nor evil, but feared. Hidden. Suppressed. A child of that blood should not exist. Not anymore." Elara's voice broke. "So Kieran is cursed?" "No," Ulrich said, his eyes sad. "He is powerful. But power like that, it draws attention. From enemies. From the heavens. Even from fate itself." Later that night, Kieran found Kieran standing outside the pack house, staring up at the moon, his eyes glowing faintly. The boy turned to him. "Am I bad, father?" The word caught Kieran off guard. Father. The first time Kieran had called him that. Kieran knelt, placing a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "No, son. You're not bad. You're rare. And that scares people. But I'm not afraid of you. And I'll never let anyone hurt you." Kieran looked away. "I feel something inside me. Something. Waiting." Kieran's voice was firm. "Then we'll face it. Together." Behind them, Elara watched from the shadows, her heart torn between pride and dread. She had carried them, nurtured them, protected them with every breath, but nothing could prepare her for this, the knowledge that one of her children might be the most powerful, and most dangerous, being the werewolf world had ever seen. And yet, when Kieran looked back at her, she saw the same innocent eyes he had as a baby, the same trust. So she smiled. For him. For Kieran. For the family they were finally becoming. Even if the world was holding its breath for what came next. 9. The Betrayer Within. The Blackthorn pack was under lockdown. After Kieran's burst of shadow power, whispers spread like wildfire, some calling him the savior foretold, others branding him a threat. Kieran doubled the patrols. Elara kept the twins close. And the council grew increasingly restless. But the danger wouldn't come from the forest. It was already inside their walls. It began with a failed poisoning. Leora, always the brighter of the twins, had taken her usual evening tea with Mira, the healer. Moments after sipping it, her skin flushed with heat, and she collapsed, breath ragged, pupils blown wide. Elara had screamed, cradling her daughter's trembling form, eyes filled with terror as Kieran burst into the room. "She's burning up," Elara sobbed. Something's wrong." It took Mira everything she had to stabilize Leora. But what caught Kieran's attention wasn't the antidote, it was who brought the tea. An Omega named Kalen, quiet, loyal. Trusted. Too trusted. The boy swore he hadn't known. Said he'd been handed the cup by one of the council's messengers. But when pressed for names, he hesitated. Stumbled. Lied. Kieran's fury was ice cold. He had him detained, but that night, he walked the silent halls of the pack house alone, mind turning over every conversation, every meeting, every word said in trust. And it hit him like a blade. Garrick. His beta. His brother in arms. The one who had stood by his side through every war, every decision. The same Garrick who had once urged him to move on from Elara. Who had vouched for Serafina. Who had been strangely quiet since the twins arrived. That same night, Kieran followed Garrick deep into the forest, past the borders, and caught him beneath the crescent moon, speaking to a cloaked figure. Elara, sensing something wrong, had followed Kieran, and watched with him from the shadows. "I did what you asked," Garrick said. "I slowed the council. I kept Kieran distracted. But I won't kill children." "That wasn't part of the deal." The cloaked figure hissed. "You no longer get to choose. The Moonborn must be separated, or the darkness will spread. If you won't act, Draven will." Kieran's growl cut through the trees like thunder. "You traitor." Garrick whirled around, but it was too late. Kieran was on him in seconds, pinning him to the ground, fangs bared, fists clenched. "I trusted you with everything. My pack. My family. My mate." Elara appeared behind him, eyes wide with betrayal, hand clutched to her heart. "You were there the night I disappeared," she whispered. "You knew." Garrick's voice cracked. "I didn't know he'd take you. I thought he just wanted leverage, a negotiation. But then he kept you. And I was already in too deep." Kieran's fist trembled, raised in fury. But Elara's hand on his arm stilled him. "Not here," she said. "Not like this." They dragged Garrick back to the pack, bound in chains, a traitor exposed not by battle, but by the love he tried to destroy. And that night, as the pack reeled from the betrayal of their trusted beta, Kieran stood alone at the cliff's edge, watching the stars with Elara at his side. "I trusted him with my life," he said. "And now," Elara murmured, taking his hand, "you trust me again. That matters more." He looked at her, really looked at her, and something in him finally settled. But they both knew. If betrayal could bloom so close to the throne, the worst was still to come. 10. The Return of the Rogue King. The sky had turned a blood orange hue as twilight sank into the Blackthorn Valley. The air was too still, the birds too quiet. Even the wolves patrolling the border sensed it, that something ancient was stirring, returning, coming home with teeth bared. And then, the horn sounded. Not an attack. A summons. Kieran raced to the gates, heart pounding as the guards stood frozen, unsure whether to fight or bow. There, standing tall in black leathers and crimson-lined robes, was Alpha Draven, exiled king, blood traitor, and the wolf who had stolen everything from Kieran. He hadn't aged. Still carved from shadow and arrogance, with eyes like coal and a smile made of knives. Behind him stood his emissaries, cloaked wolves with blades at their sides, but they didn't move. This wasn't a siege. It was a challenge. "I come in peace," Draven called, voice silken thunder. "And with an offer you cannot afford to ignore." Kieran's fists clenched at his sides. Elara stepped beside him, body trembling, not from fear, but from rage. She could still hear Draven's voice in her nightmares. Still feel the chains that had bound her wrists. The cold of his lies. "Step onto my land and I'll rip your throat out," Kieran growled. Draven chuckled. "So territorial, brother. We share more than you know." Kieran's wolf surged beneath his skin, barely restrained. "You took my mate. You kept my children from me." Draven's expression shifted. "I raised them when you couldn't. Protected them when no one else would. They were never yours to protect." Draven's eyes flicked to Elara, softening with something dangerous, something that used to pass for affection. "She was once mine, Kieran. At least in spirit. But it was never about her. Not really." He stepped forward, just to the line where pack law forbade bloodshed. "It's about the children. The Moonborn twins. You think they belong here? With soft hearts and weaker wolves?" Kieran's growl echoed across the trees. Draven smiled wider. "Join me, Kieran. Unite our packs. With the power they carry, we could reshape the North, make a new order. They need guidance, not sentiment. You're too ruled by your past. But me? He spread his arms. I see the future. Elara stepped forward, voice ice cold. You see control. You don't care about Kieran and Elara. You just want to mold them into weapons. Draven's gaze turned sharp. And you think Kieran won't do the same? He already has his sword pointed inward, waiting to strike when one of them turns dark. The silence that followed hit harder than a howl. Because the truth stung. Kieran did fear it. Not because he didn't love them, but because love had limits when fate and prophecy whispered doom. Still, he took Elara's hand, lifted it for all to see. We are united. In blood. In bond. And we don't need you. Draven's smile vanished. You'll regret this, he said. When the prophecy unfolds and one of your children brings this pack to its knees, don't come crawling to me. Then, with a swirl of shadows and silence, he was gone. But his presence lingered, like smoke in a room where something precious had just burned. Later that night, Elara and Kieran sat together in the war room, the firelight flickering between them. He'll come back, she whispered. He always comes back. Kieran looked at her, heart heavy. So will I. No matter what happens, I'll keep coming back to you. Their hands found each other again, strong despite the tremble. And between them, a silent vow, they would protect their children. Even if it meant breaking the world to do it. 11. The bond reclaimed. Storm clouds rolled over Blackthorn like the breath of fate itself. Tensions in the pack were thick enough to taste. Draven's appearance had unsettled everyone. Council members barked orders, warriors trained longer, and whispers filled the corridors. Whispers of war. Whispers of prophecy. Kieran tried to hide the weight pressing on him, but Elara could see it in the way he lingered at the children's door at night. In the way he touched her less, spoke in clipped words. Like he was afraid to hope again. Afraid to feel. Then the attack came. Not a siege, something worse. A beast from the north, shadow-drenched and howling with a voice that bent the trees, burst into the village perimeter under the full moon. A creature not seen in generations, part rogue, part summoned, bound by dark magic. It went straight for the pack's heart. Elara was the first to meet it. She stood protectively in front of the twins' cottage, energy flaring through her veins. Her wolf surged to the surface, fur burning silver, her eyes blazing with ancient fire. But the creature was strong, too strong. Its jaws snapped toward her throat. And then Kieran arrived. He hit the beast like a thunderclap, tearing it away from her with a roar that shook the mountains. He didn't shift fully, he didn't need to. His strength was primal, his rage pure. Elara, bloodied but unbowed, rose beside him and shifted. Alpha and Luna. Side by side. Mate bonded by war. Together, they moved as one. Her flame, his fury. Their wolves danced through the clearing, matching every strike, every breath, until the creature lay broken beneath them, fading into smoke. And then silence. Elara turned to him, chest heaving, blood streaking her collarbone. Kieran looked at her like he'd seen her for the first time. He stepped closer, his fingers trembling as they brushed a lock of hair from her face. You almost died. But I didn't, she whispered. Because you came for me. Their eyes locked, and then something ancient surged between them. The bond. It hit like a wave crashing through stone. A tether, buried but not broken, lit up between their souls. He felt her heartbeat in his chest. She tasted his grief like salt on her tongue. Their wolves reached across the chasm of years and claimed each other again. I thought I lost you forever, Kieran said, voice raw. You did, Elara said softly. But you never stopped calling me home. And then he kissed her, not out of desire, but out of survival. Out of desperation. Out of love. It was a kiss of fire and frost, of broken vows and eternal promises. The kind that doesn't ask permission, because fate has already said yes. They fell together to the forest floor, tangled in each other, in memory and in renewal. For one perfect moment, they weren't Alpha and Luna. They were simply Kieran and Elara. And though war loomed and prophecy whispered dark things in the night, they knew, their bond was no longer broken. It had been reclaimed. 12. Secrets of the Moonstone Cave. The dream started the night after the bond reignited. Kieran woke in a sweat, eyes glowing violet, whispering words he didn't understand. Elara stood at the foot of his bed, eyes wide and strange. We need to go, she said. The moon is calling. Elara and Kieran followed them at dawn, through woods thick with fog, to a place long buried by time and fear. The Moonstone Cave. No wolf had set foot inside in over a century. Said to be cursed. Said to house the bones of prophecy. It was where the first Alpha had knelt to the moon goddess, where sacred knowledge was once kept, and locked away. The entrance was hidden behind a veil of vines and silence, but when Kieran and Elara approached, the stone shimmered and parted. The cave welcomed them. Inside, moonlight spilled from cracks in the ceiling like water, dancing across crystals embedded in the walls. The floor was smooth, worn by paws long dead. Runes lit up beneath the twins' feet, same as those that had appeared weeks before. "This place remembers them," Elara whispered. Kieran gripped her hand tighter, his voice low. Or it was waiting for them. At the heart of the cave stood a stone altar, and upon it, a massive circular tablet, half buried in moss. The twins approached, and as their hands brushed the surface, the stone cracked, and unfolded. A map. A prophecy. And a warning. The markings showed twin wolves, one silver, one shadow, circling a shattered crown. Between them burned a single flame, flickering with life. Words etched in ancient lupine script glowed as the twins touched them. One born to lead, one born to destroy. Together they balance. Apart, the world falls to ruin. Elara felt her heart seize. Kieran's wolf growled softly behind his ribs. "I thought they shared one fate," Elara murmured. "But they don't. Not entirely." Kieran's gaze was hard. "It's a choice. It always is." But beneath the altar was something else, an object wrapped in cloth, radiating power. Elara unwrapped it slowly to reveal a moonstone pendant, identical to the one she used to wear. But this one pulsed faintly. "Alive. It's hers," she said. "The moon goddess. It's marked by her." As she held it, a rush of images flooded her mind, visions of the past, of Draven kneeling before a flame. Of Kieran as a young man, cloaked in darkness, standing at a crossroads. Of Lior's hands covered in light, reaching for her brother as the earth split between them. Elara gasped, falling to her knees. Kieran was beside her instantly. "What did you see?" She gripped the pendant, voice shaking. "The twins will face each other. And when they do, only one will walk away." A silence settled in the cave. Heavy. Eternal. Kieran and Elara stood hand in hand, staring at the stone as if it had spoken to them in their dreams. And as the moon passed over the cave above, the pendant glowed brighter. Fate wasn't coming. It had already arrived. 13. The Alpha's choice. The call came at dawn, a blood-chilling howl that shattered the stillness of the blackthorn sky. A scout, mortally wounded, stumbled into the gates with torn flesh and terror in his eyes. "Draven," he gasped. "He's coming. But not with war. With a message. And a hostage." By the time Kieran reached the outer border, his entire world tilted. Draven stood in the clearing with two wolves flanking him, both cloaked in crimson. In between them, Elara knelt, hands bound, collar of silver cutting into her neck, her face bloodied but defiant. She met Kieran's eyes with a look that begged him not to give in. But everything inside him already had. "She came to spy," Draven announced, voice echoing across the trees. "She broke the sacred oath of peace. I was merciful. I didn't kill her. But now, I demand something in return." Kieran stepped forward, barely holding his wolf back. "What do you want?" Draven grinned. "Your son." The clearing fell into stunned silence. "Kieran," he continued smoothly. "The boy belongs to me. He carries my magic, the mark of shadow blood. He was born to rule beside me, not be smothered in your pack's weakness." Kieran's fists clenched. "He's my son. He's your undoing," Draven spat. "You saw the signs. You know what he's becoming. Give him to me, and Elara walks free." Behind him, Elara shook her head, panic rising in her eyes. "Don't," she mouthed. Kieran's heart shattered. His mate. His child. His pack. All twisted in a noose woven by fate. And then, as if fate couldn't be crueler, Kieran appeared, having followed his father into the woods, drawn by instinct or something deeper. He stepped into the clearing, violet aura pulsing faintly. He didn't cry. He didn't run. "I'll go," he said. "Kieran, no," Elara cried, but he held up a hand. "If it means keeping Mom safe, I'll go." The world stopped moving. Kieran's wolf howled inside him, demanding he fight. But he could see it. Kieran's power was growing unstable. His emotions twisted the air itself. The boy didn't know how to control it yet. And if this escalated, the prophecy could be triggered here and now. Then a whisper. Elara's voice, soft and raw. "Don't choose me." Kieran's breath caught. "You're the Alpha," she said. "You choose for the pack. You choose for our children." He looked at Kieran, brave, trembling, already shaped by sacrifice. Then at Elara, bleeding, bound, The woman he had loved through fire and time. Kieran stepped forward. Slowly. Deliberately. "No," he said. "I choose neither." Then, in one swift motion, he shifted, silver fur exploding from his skin as he lunged, not at Raven, but at the guards holding Elara. Chaos erupted. Kalen shouted. Wolves clashed. Magic screamed through the trees. Kieran tore through the silver collar and pulled Elara into his arms as his warriors poured from the shadows, launching the counterstrike he'd prepared. It was war. But it was also family. And Kieran would not lose them again. That night, after the blood settled and Draven vanished back into the trees, empty-handed but furious, Kieran sat beside Elara in the healer's tent. "You should have let me go," she whispered, tears staining her cheeks. "I've already lost you once," he said. "And I'll never do it again. Not for prophecy. Not for power. Not even for the world." And as the storm raged outside, they lay there, holding hands, bruised but breathing, knowing the price of love was high. But still worth paying. 14. When the blood runs black. The aftermath of Draven's failed ambush left the pack scarred, but not broken. Kieran tightened defenses. The council voted unanimously to prepare for war. And Elara hadn't left Kalen's side for 3 days. Because something inside him was changing. He wouldn't eat. Wouldn't sleep. His eyes stayed lit with that eerie violet glow, even when the sun was high. The shadows clung to him now, not as a shield, but as something alive. Something hungry. Elara tried to bring him back, reading to him, making jokes, even coaxing him into running games, but Kalen barely responded. His skin felt too cold. His voice too quiet. Then came the night the earth cracked. It started with a scream, Leora's. Elara raced into the clearing to find Kalen on his knees, clutching his chest, dark energy spiraling around him like smoke. The moon above flickered, yes, flickered, as if the very heavens were gasping. Kieran arrived a heartbeat later, but it was already too late. Kalen looked up, and for the first time, his eyes weren't violet. They were pitch black. "Make it stop," he whispered. "It's inside me. It's screaming." The ground beneath him split open, stone and soil ripped apart in jagged veins as tendrils of raw shadow shot skyward. Trees bent. Wolves howled. The pack felt it like a ripple of death. Kieran surged forward, grabbing his son, trying to pull him from the eye of the storm, but the energy scorched his skin, burned deep into his soul. "Kalen," Elara cried, falling to her knees beside them. "You're stronger than this. Fight it." "I am fighting," Kalen choked. "But it's winning." Then, in a flash of raw, blinding power, everything went still. When Kieran opened his eyes, the forest was silent. The rift had closed. The shadows had vanished. Kalen lay unconscious in his arms. But the damage was done. The sacred grounds were scorched black. Half the training field was destroyed. A tree older than the pack itself had crumbled into ash. That night, the council convened. The voices were louder. More fearful. "This power is unnatural," one elder barked. "He cannot control it. He's still a child," Elara argued, fury in her voice. "You don't exile a child for being different." Kieran said nothing for a long time. Because deep inside, where no alpha should ever admit fear, he was afraid. Later, alone in his quarters, he stood at the window and stared at the stars. Elara joined him, silent, slipping her arms around his waist. "He's our son," she whispered. "I know," he said. "And we have to believe he can be more than what the prophecy warns." Kieran's voice was quiet. "And if he's not?" Alara's grip tightened. "Then we love him until the end. No matter what." The moon rose high over the broken forest. And in the shadows of the pack house, Kalen opened his eyes again, no longer black, but something darker still, and smiled. 15. The final howl. The war drums began at dawn. Draven had returned, this time not with words, but with an army. Rogues. Shadowborn. Broken packs lured by promises of power and fear of the Moonborn prophecy. They gathered on the ridge overlooking Blackthorn territory like a dark tide ready to swallow the world. Inside the pack house, Kieran stood fully armored, silver threads woven through his leathers, the mark of his bloodline gleaming across his chest. Elara adjusted his collar with shaking hands, her lips brushing his jaw as she whispered, "No matter what happens, come back to me." He kissed her like it was the first time and the last. In the war tent, Kalen and Leora stood side by side, now fully aware of what they were. What they carried. The prophecy had split them, light and dark, but love still bound them. A bond forged not by fate, but by choice. "I won't let you fall," Leora told her brother. Kieran gave a faint smile. Then don't follow me if I do. Moments later, the forest erupted into chaos. Wolves clashed. Magic tore through the sky. The battle was brutal and primal, blood and fang, shadow and fire. At the center of it all, Kieran fought like nothing the world had ever seen. And then Draven appeared, blazing with power, his aura cloaked in darkness, his voice rising like thunder. "You can't save him," he roared at Kieran and Elara. "The boy is mine. The prophecy is truth, he is your ruin." Kieran stumbled, shaking, shadow pouring from his hands like liquid death. "No," Elara said, stepping forward. She walked through the battlefield, ignoring the war around her, until she reached her son. She dropped to her knees, cradling his face, and whispered, "You are not your power. You are not the prophecy. You are my boy. You are his son." Kieran's hands trembled. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he whispered. "Then don't," Kieran said, appearing behind them, bloodied but unbroken. "Be stronger. Not for us. For you." In that moment, light burst from Leora's chest, a surge of pure moonfire, and collided with the shadow surrounding Kieran. Brother and sister. Light and dark. The prophecy fulfilled not in destruction, but in balance. Draven screamed, trying to summon the darkness back into Kieran. But Kieran turned, his aura stabilizing, rising like a sun after a long, black night. "No," he said to Draven. "I choose me. Not you. Not your war." And with one final howl, Kieran unleashed his power, not to destroy, but to cleanse. The battlefield was bathed in silver light. The rogues fled. The shadow fell. And Draven, once feared, once king, was swallowed by the very magic he tried to control. Silence followed. Then, slowly, a cry of victory rose from the Blackthorn wolves. The war was over. But peace always comes with a price. That night, as the pack celebrated, Elara stood alone beneath the stars, a paxstone clutched in her hand. Kieran found her near the border. "You slipped away once," he said quietly. She turned, tears in her eyes. "I have to go." He froze. "Why?" She stepped closer, pressing her forehead to his. "Because I felt it when Kieran's power surged. It called something awake in me. Something I don't understand yet. I need to find out who I am. Without chains. Without fear." He didn't stop her. But his heart broke all over again. "I love you, Elara," he said. She smiled softly. "And I'll always come back to you. But this time, on my own terms." She kissed him, long and slow. Then she turned, walking into the trees, disappearing into moonlight. And as her scent faded, Kieran raised his head to the stars. And let out one final howl. Not of grief. But of love. Of endings. And of the promise of return.